Hello, welcome to Where Peter Is Live. I'm your host, Rachel Amiri. I'm production editor at Where Peter Is. Tonight we're going to discuss two major themes of Pope Francis's pontificate, mercy and synodality. And we are joined by a special guest. I'm going to show you everyone who's here tonight. Tonight we're joined by Don Clemmer. Hi, Don.
Hi, Rachel. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming. And we have Mike Lewis, as usual.
Hi, everybody.
Fearless leader. And we have David Lafferty joining us from Canada.
Hi.
David, do you want to lead us off with the prayer before we really get going?
Sure. We decided to start with just a very simple Hail Mary for Mike's sister, who is in the hospital right now, and we're all praying for her protection and her recovery. So, in the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
We can tell you've been praying that one a lot, David.
Yeah.
Terrible.
I know. Mumble it to yourself. You know, it's like one of those things where, and then you're on stage with all of our vast audience.
The simplest prayer I can mess up.
So, Don, you're joining us tonight. I'm going to just read your bio so everyone knows who you are. Your work has appeared in the National Catholic Reporter, Catholic News Service, America and U.S. Catholic, and you edit Crossroads magazine for the Catholic Diocese of Lexington. And then from 2008 to 2016, you were in the communications department of the USCCB, correct?
That's correct.
That's all. Well, thanks for joining us tonight. I know that you and Mike know each other.
Yeah, so we worked in the communications department. I guess we overlapped for 5 or 6 years in there. Mm-hmm. And Don was a protege of the great Sister Marianne Walsh, the legendary media relations guru of
spokesnun. I believe is the technical term.
Yeah,
I remember reading her blog posts, like for the USCCB communications department, like the original blogger format of the blog posts, 15 years ago. Yeah.
And I designed the banner at the top of the of the blog. It was there was one that wasn't very attractive, but then I came up with 5 or 6, and one of them several were not the most serious attempts, but one of them I had USCC blog, with the B and I just threw that together and then they decided that was their favorite. And so that was the banner. They might even still be, well, probably not because they've changed their webpage, but yeah.
I mean, it was just hosted on Blogger though. It might have survived the transition over. I don't know. I don't read it regularly myself, so if it's even used,
I'm not sure if it's around anymore. But the early days
we could tell.
You have stories. Well, we will. We're not here swapping stories tonight. Tonight we were planning on talking about mercy and synodality. And Don, you recently authored a piece in U.S. Catholic Magazine, and we'll share a link in the comments so our viewers and future listeners can access that. But it was pretty long, and it was about Pope Francis has called for an age of mercy, was the title, and where is it? So what kind of led you to write the piece?
Well, I mean, I think it's a great pivot from Sister Marianne, a sister of mercy, and a younger member of that community weighs in on the topic. But I as an English major, like the theological and historical and all these other fields, I have no business in pieces of the Pope saying, we're entering a new era, in human events, and it's an age of mercy. I think it's a fair question to say, just what's he getting at there? What's that all about? And so I just started pulling on those threads from what do we understand about mercy from the standpoint of just looking at the recent history of the papacy, and what it revealed, and I think, and this links into issue, synodality, is that we don't appreciate the fact that we're caught up in this narrative that spans longer than our lifetimes in terms of Francis isn't the first pope to call for an age of mercy. It's right there in the opening address from John the 23rd at the council. It was pointed out to me while I was doing my research that this is something that John Paul went back to again and again and again and again throughout his pontificate, and that there's a real continuity there. And it was Dan Philpott at Notre Dame who cast it really excellently. He said, like, the mercy is how God responds to evil and violence. You have the crucifixion and you have the resurrection, and you have something like the first half of the 20th century, and then you have this room full of bishops at the council who've all survived the war, kind of dusting themselves off and saying, "Oh, how do we be better?" And so we, 60 years not even is nothing in terms of something taking root in the church, or but it's so we're just a few generations into kind of this new and only an era marked by only accelerating change, and that just brings out the fact that times of change, as another source pointed out to me, are really disorienting things where people get kind of freaked out, and so there's a lot to be had there in terms of like showing mercy, like that, people just, one example is like, what we define so much of our worth by our work, and it's like, how many of our jobs will be, done by automated programs by
robots in the future.
A decade that we will see.
Yeah.
Defense of the papacy by machine.
But oh yeah, no, that
comes at you.
but
ultramontane robots.
But it points to the upheaval, and it points to where the field hospital will definitely be open, and not wanting for business, and so there's a chance to be merciful, but also to kind of mind this gift. Like, what do we think that it is? Because it's also kind of an antidote for all the things that we get perennially wrong in the discourse, like not this ditch, not that ditch, but here's something we could try. And of course, it's just so antithetical to how we usually engage. But it's so that was really rewarding, and but it also I found myself writing about synodality, this notion of like the listening church, that where we've got these voices from the periphery kind of coming in, and how that can help make us merciful. Like, we have ignorance, really unjust ignorance of what our brothers and sisters in the Amazon are going through, until we pass the mic to them at a synod of bishops, and they say, well, let us tell you what being Catholic is like in 2019,
and the resistance that there's a big growing pain, I think, as we become a church of mercy. Like you were saying, I mean, one thing that popped into my mind, and when we're talking about era of mercy, the big change to the liturgical calendar that John Paul II made was adding Divine Mercy Sunday to the second week of Easter. But also, you bring up the Amazon Synod, and I think that was a really eye-opening moment for me. It was, I mean, I keep saying that was sort of the moment that made where Peter is, that put us on the map, because there was a discord between a church that was, I guess the mainstream church was just covering the synod, And oh yeah, there's some people that you can ignore, that you should ignore, that are like, screaming outside. And we noticed that this was actually becoming a pretty big movement within the church, and that something bad was going to happen, and we needed to address it. So Pedro Gabriel and David and I and several other people wrote pieces basically trying to explain enculturation, trying to explain, like Pedro really dug into what is their how have they enculturated Christianity in the Amazon? What is Pachamama? What isn't Pachamama? Is this statue Pachamama? No, it's not. And trying to walk people through it, thinking that maybe at some point it's like, oh, okay, well, this is the logical, rational answer. But what we ran up to is what culminated when that guy chucked the figurines into the river. And it's, I guess that's the where Peter is angle to it. It's sort of like there's this dilemma, there's this rock that we're hitting as we're trying to move forward with the church. We're not trying to move the church forward. We're trying to move forward with the church. And yeah, go ahead. Yeah, but there's just this resistance.
Well, but it gets to like the transitional nature of it again. Like this isn't what it always felt like. And when we talked about the Amazon Synod for the story, like it was tracking with a conversation we were having about like Truth and Reconciliation Commission, like denazification and all of like, what do you do when the worst of the storm is past and you're picking up the pieces of your house, like and strangely enough, and listening to you just now, it kind of resonated again. It leads you to something like Black Lives Matter. This notion of you find a segment of your fellow travelers whose hackles are really raised by, we've got to learn about these experiences that I haven't had. What are you trying to bring me along to? I don't know if I trust. I think the lines between that and like some of the ugliness at the Amazon Synod, it's all of a piece as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I've noticed myself that this idea of synodality is taking a very long time to sink in for a lot of people. I think there's a lot of people who don't understand it and so ignore it. And then there's people who, seem to be intentionally ignoring it, like kind of putting it aside. And then there's some who are actively opposing it. And I think, it's because this is such an incredibly radical idea. I think when we talk about synodality, we often underestimate just how incredibly new and powerful this is. This idea, it's really, I think like Pope Francis talks about, I think this is really the fulfillment in many ways of Second Vatican Council. This is like the second big phase of the implementation of the council, and I think it could potentially open the door to a lot of wonderful, wonderful things. And it's one of the most exciting aspects of the church for me right now. I can also see how it's going to lead to a lot of clashes, a lot of tensions, a lot of misunderstandings. So I really appreciate that you wrote this piece, which really, to me, explained synodality in such a powerful way. But we've seen and in the Amazon Synod again that this is going to be a very rough process. This is going to be a process where there's going to be a lot of false starts and painful trials, I think. But we're also seeing it in the this synodal way in Germany and the problems that we're running into there, because it's not just enough to kind of open the doors to this idea of synodality. It has to be done right. It has to be done, according to the sort of principles that Pope Francis has laid out.
Right, and I think one of the things, and what you said, I agree with everything you said, but I can see how somebody listening to this or watching this will hear what you say and interpret it as something different. Because some people seem to have this notion that synodality is delegation, or it's democratizing, like, okay, the Amazon church, they can go do their own thing, and the Germans can go do their own thing, and they can all come up with their own decisions. But really, one of the keys to Francis's vision for synodality, and I know Cardinal Joe Tobin gave a very good talk on this recently, is the idea of walking together. And Pope Francis, at the end of the first Synod on the Family in 2014, he talked about the importance of walking with and under Peter, but Peter is there, the guarantor of it all. Go ahead and bring whatever you want out on the table, and let's discuss this. Let's see how the Spirit moves us. If you really feel that this issue is really important. I mean, people, that was one of the things that got me, was Cardinal Casper, the way he was treated. The Pope invited him to make this, to make this proposal, which was within legitimate discussion in the church for at least the 1970s and early 80s. And then, okay, well, let's talk about it again, and let's see if there's anything from this we can draw, if there are possibilities that we haven't really considered. And then the end result was ultimately Amoris Laetitia, which wasn't identical to the Casper proposal, but I think it was influenced. You've got to go over the line. You've got to discuss going over the line to see where the line is. And I don't see that as dangerous as a Catholic, because we believe that the Holy Spirit guides the church. But other people felt a little bit differently.
Yeah, Pope Francis talks about the levels of synodality, how it's supposed to proceed, and it's supposed to start with the people in their, kind of concrete lived situations. And then it goes to the pastors, and then who listen to the people and, the communities that they're part of. Then it goes up to the bishops, right? And then eventually it makes its way up to the Pope, who has, he's listening to the whole church this way, all the parts of it, and then can make decisions. So it's, Pope Francis describes it too as an inverted pyramid, and it really is like that. It's if we're used to thinking of the church as kind of like a regular pyramid, where just commands come down from on high, and our only duty is to obey them and not question them, or not have any input, then it's going to be a difficult concept, this idea that we have this listening church where people are going to start saying things, and that message is going to get up to the Pope. But that's the key, is keeping the whole church in the picture, that all of this has to come up in the end to the Pope, who in the end makes the decisions. I mean, we saw that in the Amazon Synod, where you had that whole the issue of the Viri Probati, and how it became, I think Pope Francis described it became more like a kind of parliamentary process or something like that, where people were kind of campaigning on either side for or against it, and it became kind of poisoned by that sort of parliamentary sort of way of thinking. And so in the end, he decided, you know what, we're not going to touch it. We're not going to, this isn't the time. The Holy Spirit isn't guiding us to make a decision right now. So if it doesn't have that aspect of true discernment, if it doesn't have, the involvement of the Holy Spirit, then it's not the true synodality.
And isn't this really where the concept of mercy really enters in? Because it is kind of an expression of mercy for that pyramid to be inverted, for the leaders to listen to all of the people who are really walking with the church, who are on the ground, who are in the field hospital, and bringing them into like a participation and listening is itself a merciful action. It's like turning your attention towards people who don't usually get attention. And so we can see then how Francis's actions of like going to the peripheries and instructing his pastors to do that is that merciful listening as part of the synodal process is like what he's calling towards. And personally, when I've read, a lot of the kind of controversy surrounding various recent, synodal processes, people seem to view it through a lens of like politics, like worrying that different factions are going to manipulate the church's teaching somehow. And so it's almost like they're missing the rationale, and they're missing the point, and they're missing the vision. And I don't know if that's...
And that will happen too, and it has happened already. But at the same time, at the same time, if we're really engaged in that synodal process, we're going to see when that's happening. We'll recognize it. I think everyone kind of saw it at the Amazon Synod that there were like these different factions and stuff. So hopefully that those things will become apparent. It won't be possible to kind of sneak an agenda through, right? I don't think you can get an agenda past the Pope. I'm pretty confident that even if you really try, it would be hard to fool the Pope in that kind of context.
Yeah, I know that Rodrigo Guerra was when we interviewed him, he took part in that 2014 Synod on the Family, and he noticed that there were two different, they said the two different synods going on, the one that actually took place in the hall, and then the one that was going on in the media. And there were certain characters, and he even asked Cardinal Burke, like, to his face, like, what are you doing? Why are you trying to undermine this? And he said Cardinal Burke gave him a look and left the room. But he went to Francis though, and he's saying, Holy Father, this stuff is happening. What are we going to do about it? And Pope Francis said, "You don't pray enough, do you?" And so, if you haven't listened to that podcast, I think it's the second one I did it's a 3-parter with Rodrigo, and it was a good one. So I encourage anyone to go back to that one, but a little bit of inside story, because he saw it happening, and it's one of those things that's divided friendships and divided close relationships. I mean, some of his closest professors became, on opposite sides of that divide. And it's just sort of like, are you with the Pope? Do you trust the church, or have you? And I mean, I don't want to criticize people as having a loss of faith, but it's like, do you believe that the Catholic Church is what the church says it is, or not? So anyway, sorry.
And that kind of gets at our endemic discomfort with mercy, because I mean that has been, whether it's we're looking at these families, or we're looking at just what on earth is going on with these young people, or we're setting out for the Amazon, like that there's always that sense of like, I don't want to go right to the prodigal's older brother, but like that resistance of oh no, we're not going to, and on some level, I guess that's almost like the churchy version of looking at it through a factional lens. But yeah, at least I think it's a couple notches closer to.
Well, I mean, it's welcoming someone back early. Welcoming somebody back before they've paid their dues, before they've made their full amends. I mean, the father saw the prodigal son off in the distance and ran up to greet him, and then threw him a party. The son, yeah, he had some words when he got back, but the father just sort of like, no, you're back. And I think that there's a natural instinct. I mean, I remember, and it was Pope Benedict who really did a good exegesis on that in Jesus of Nazareth, because I always sympathized with the older brother. That was always a big part of me. It was just sort of like being the Catholic kid and being in the religious family and all that kind of stuff. It's like, why don't I get to have the fun like everybody else? I don't know if that, or I always felt kind of bound by my morals, or having to stand up for my beliefs or whatever. And then, and I was like, well, and here's this guy that comes back after having all this fun. And, I think I mean, that's really the way people are thinking about it. They're like, think of those people who did have to, with Amoris Laetitia, who did have to abstain for that many years, or think about all those people who didn't have married priests for all those years, and they just had to make do with seeing the priest once every 8 years, and I don't know.
Well, a few things that jumped out researching the article, Mike, were just like mercy as God's gift, and just this free and totally unfettered and gratuitous God of ours, and then the mystery that's wrapped up in both mercy, but also wrapped up in conversion, and there were people said some really interesting things about, like, someone else's conversion is not there for my entertainment. It's not there for my sense that, oh, everything is right with the world. And maybe that's just me piling onto the poor older brother again. But these are the sort of things that got teased out, and I'd never really thought about them that way. But it did draw me closer to, like, that there is something wondrous at the heart of all of this.
A mystery, really. I mean, it's the mystery of mercy, and I don't know where that has come from in my lexicon, but I believe it's Pope Francis. That we can't really understand God's working in other people's lives, and it's not there for us to comprehend and make sense of and tie a bow on it. And now I have a message that I can apply to my own. It's really to understand that God's working in their life and God's working in my life, and God has shown me mercy. So now I need to extend that to others. And I believe that was kind of the sense I got from you. You had a lot of wide ranging interviews in your piece, and someone did speak of mercy in that way, that we have to recall that we've been shown mercy to show it to others. And that does seem to be the method that Francis is trying to drag us all into recognizing.
Another piece that really ties together mercy and synodality, it was the judicial vicar in Milwaukee, really lovely guy, who talked about integration is something that, in a canonical way, is applied. Like when you're like, all right, we've got the situation. How do we normalize it? How do we bring it? How can we, bring it up the ramp, if you will, and that. And when you're approaching, the life of someone that's involved, it's not healthy for something to be compartmentalized. Like, how does this get made part of who this whole person is? And so that's mercy, but that is also synodality. This notion of, again, how are the peripheries integrated into how the, whatever you want to call it, the nerve center, the brain, the heart, the head, does its calculus as it functions.
You quoted Carolyn Wu saying that synodality is subsidiarity in action. So that's what just came to mind when you said that. It's bringing the people who are at the lowest rungs of the church kind of into making them heard and recognizing them. We also wanted to bring in this very recent lecture that Cardinal Tobin gave. I believe it was Tuesday of this week. Was it March 4th? It was at Loyola University in Chicago. It's the Hank Center sponsored this. I believe it's an annual lecture that they invite a cardinal to give. And it's the Common Cause lecture, and he delivered it earlier this week. We're going to link it also. We had some clips we wanted to show. I don't know. We can get into that. I don't know if there was anything anyone wanted to kind of introduce the lecture a little bit before we, just because it'll take over.
Well, yeah, Don, why don't you give some of the background, because you're the one who recommended we talk about it.
Sure. Well, I set out to write about the Age of Mercy and ended up writing a lot about synodality, and he talks about synodality as the long game of Francis and ends up talking a lot about mercy. But it's and even though Francis was name dropping Cardinal Casper in the first 48 hours, but I believe it's he notes that synodality is something that's been right there from the offset, and he sets the scene with literally the introduction of Francis to the world. Maybe we could start there.
Sure. So I think that's our first clip. Mike, do you want to play?
Yeah.
Jesus did a lot of walking. He also gave us the great commandment to go forth and make disciples of all nations. Paul looked back on his ministry saying that he had run the race. And more recently, John the 23rd offered one rationale for calling the Second Vatican Council: to make the human sojourn on this earth less sad. And it's apt to note that John the 23rd's contribution, because in so many ways we are still caught up in the leg of the journey that he initiated with Vatican II.
Well, that's a perfectly applicable clip too.
That wasn't the one we were talking about.
There's another one where he notes, like, Francis on the balcony was already talking about bishop and people walking together. But yeah, talk about getting to the same house through two different doors. Like, you say, what's this age of mercy about, and end up with John at the opening of the council, and he's saying that synodality also, really, begins to flower with that synodal act of the Second Vatican Council, and John throwing open the windows and everything else.
And he really, sorry.
The Synod of Bishops, it really is the fruit of the council. It was established by Paul VI as a way to carry on the work of the council, as a way to continue Vatican II.
The process, though, of kind of opening up synodality within the church, I think, though, has taken quite a long time. I think Tobin talks about, he calls them pseudo synods that came after the council, that were, these were synods, but they weren't truly synodal in the sense that the fullest sense, right? And so with Pope Francis, we're kind of entering into this phase where, we're digging down deep now, and Cardinal Tobin, I think in that when he talks about opening the doors of the church, he says one of the things that happens when you open the door of the church is you start to hear the voices of the people below, and I think that's what we're starting to see now is the voices of the people below kind of becoming an actual part of this process in a new way that maybe they weren't before.
You say in a monitor configuration of four lay people scattered across geographically with on the God willing tail end of a pandemic. So yes, I as a communicator, I feel obliged to point that out and say, you're right, David.
Yes.
David, I'm kind of wondering, because you have a little bit more of a historical background, and I don't know if I'm talking out of school here, but I kind of get the sense that up through the 19th and early part of the 20th century, you might almost classify, at least by reading the official documents and a lot of the theology, you might almost classify the church as a reactionary church in a lot of ways. And I think when you look at Pope Francis, you have the opposite of a reactionary in the fullest sense. Everybody has a little, I have a little reactionary in me, and, but I think, and obviously, John Paul and Benedict got.
Oh, we lost Mike.
A little reactionaryism at all. Oh, am I back?
You're back. Yeah.
But I'm wondering if part of the shift, I guess what I'm getting at is it really is a real concrete shift we're talking about here into the era of mercy and into the era of synodality. When people are, when the church is actually willing to let go of some of that control, of some of that security to let people put their voices out there.
Yeah, and that's something that, you know, hasn't always happened at times of great change in society. So, you know, like during the period of the Reformation, you know, the church, you know, I would argue became more reactionary, became more defensive and antagonistic, and then that continued on into the, like in the 19th century. You get the rise of you know, modern philosophy and liberalism and all these things, and then the church got even more reactionary in response to it, right? And it I think it came to be seen, you know, maybe as a failing strategy in the end, that every time they did this, the church became sort of less capable of walking, right? Like it became more like caught up in its own defenses. And then you get people breaking away from it all the time, you know, whether, you know, during the Reformation or after even after the, you know, the first Vatican Council with the old Catholic Church and that sort of thing. And then you get to Vatican II, and there was this threat, maybe, you know, that the same thing could happen again, that the church would just kind of pull back into defensive mode, you know, even further. But I don't think they could even go any further. I think they had gone as far as they could possibly go. And the time was like, all right, this time we're going to open up. We're going to take a new tack here and try to change. And that's like, you know, we were talking about Pope John the 23rd there, and him, that distinction he made between moving from a church of, you know, focused on severity to a church focused on mercy. That is a massive change in the attitude of the church. And I think we're still struggling with that. I think a lot of us, there's still a sort of like cult of severity within the church. Like we want to hang on to that. And I mean, if you're on social media and you're arguing with people and stuff, it's incredible. Like people will speak like a 19th century pope when they're like attacking you, but you know, like it's just such severe, harsh language. And
I speak like a 19th century pope back at them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anathema seat.
I just pull from the syllabus of errors where it's like, you know, non-infallible teachings are still binding on.
Yeah.
I mean, that stuff is all in there.
Yeah, it's pretty harsh. I mean, now, you know, some of that language may have been necessary at the, you know, at certain points in history to get a point across, that, you know, and to make everyone listen. But you know, we're in a very different time now. So yeah, I think we're still having trouble adapting that position of mercy that Pope Francis has been modeling, you know. And I think it's, you know, it's sometimes it's because, you know, people sometimes sacrifice a lot to practice the faith and to, you know, to be Catholic, and you know, they sometimes have family troubles, lose friends, you know, run into all sorts of, you know, issues. And you kind of think like, well, you know, this is the only thing I've got that I can kind of glory in, that I'm right, and I can kind of, you know, be severe with others and you know, be like kind of talk down to them, you know, and it's hard to give that up, right? And to show mercy towards people who haven't maybe made those same kind of sacrifices. But that's what mercy is about. It's extending, you know, forgiveness and empathy towards people who may not deserve it even, right? Like that's the key. It's not, it seems to go against justice. That's, for a lot of people, I think that's the thing, is, you know, it doesn't seem just, you know, that we'd be merciful towards people who, you know, don't like the church, people who, you know, are, you know, failing in terms of their, you know, the way that they live their lives. But that's the essence of it.
And that's where my inner reactionary comes out. Actually, it's when, you know, Burke and Strickland and Vigano do their thing, and Pope Francis doesn't do anything about it. You know,
yeah.
And it's like I've kind of gotten to the point where I don't expect him to do anything about it, but you know, and people use the fact that he hasn't dissenters or whatever. But I guess maybe we shouldn't even be talking in those terms. I don't know, Don, what do you think?
Well, back to it. David was saying that, like, we set up a dichotomy of mercy and justice, and that's like, that's not how it works. Like, they're interrelated at a much deeper level and are components of one another. And it gets, bandied around a lot, but this notion of our relational understanding of justice and right relationship. And I think what's being augmented for us perhaps in this this ecclesial minute of the last 60 some years is that right relationship has to have a strong core of mercy, or it's just not going to withstand all the things that we're all getting pelted with at all times. Like, the humanity implodes under the conditions of the world today if we don't have that impulse to follow God's lead in being almost grossly merciful, or
that's really true. Yeah, Cardinal Casper, in that book that he wrote that Pope Francis read and found very profound, he talks about mercy as the expression of God's absolute sovereignty. So God, isn't bound by any kind of abstract rules of justice. It's not like God says, "Oh, I wish I could be merciful to you, but sorry, these are the rules. I can't really step beyond that." No, God can do that. God and does that, right? And gives mercy to people when He wants to, and to people sometimes who don't deserve it. And it upsets our sense of what's right and what's wrong and what people deserve. But it's that expression of God's absolute sovereignty. Otherwise, we're kind of trapped within this sort of moral system that we think even God can't, transcend.
Well, that gets into. Oh, go ahead, Rachel.
I was going to say it's really striking. Thinking just we've been talking about how Vatican II really inaugurated this program of mercy, and thinking about reactionaries and then what Vatican II was. It was not a reaction to the prior 50 years of humanity's experience on this planet, which involved multiple world wars, millions of innocents killed, mass genocide, atomic bombs dropped in, like, incinerating our neighbors across the globe. And the church was really responding to these signs of the times, not reacting. And the response was turning towards this radical need for mercy and forgiveness in relationship with one another. And I think that what I keep hearing people talk about here is this turn is really demanding a lot of us on a personal level, and we keep seeing it in different new situations and playing out in new scenarios. So in Synod on the Family, in bringing to bear mercy in how we think of and deal with people who are not like us. And so what I was trying to kind of get to with that is this idea that the scenarios and like historical events that are happening that cause major upheaval can inspire the church to respond in new and creative ways. And we continue to see that today. And I know that in Cardinal Tobin's lecture, he referred to, movements, like social movements in the United States, like Black Lives Matter and movements for racial justice. And you spoke to people in your piece who were working for that in different places in the country. But then also, like, the abuse crisis in the church calls us to respond in new ways. So I don't know if, like, that's part of what we're talking about too, is this mercy coming to bear, not only like as this theoretical thing, but as a direct response to events in the world, and how that's really a new thing that the church is trying to do. Like, it's a new mode of being.
This almost feels like a public service announcement, but the most merciful thing I can do for my neighbor is not give him a communicable respiratory disease that could kill him.
Right.
Like, and like that's, and the Vatican's got a commission on COVID-19 where they're doing everything from, assistance to local churches on the ground to, like multinational, because the Vatican's a state, like, multilateral talks and make, and I know they, are supporting waiving the intellectual property stuff on the vaccines. So I mean, they're very upfront about this is a love your neighbor, be merciful to your neighbor. We live in a society kind of moment, and so yeah, it does. It definitely, didn't end with the horrors of the first half of the 20th century, and we continue to have signs of the times all around us that point us toward what does an authentic gospel response look like.
And I think Fratelli Tutti really points in that direction. I mean, I think it's further implementation of Vatican II. It's people say it's not compromising on our faith. But it is.
Mike, you froze there.
How this world? Am I back? Hello? You got me? No? Hello?
Now you're back.
I can hear you say
Fratelli
hello,
Tutti.
but
You can hear me? Okay, well, it says that I've got a signal now. I don't know. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me speaking? All right.
yes.
So Fratelli Tutti is, despite our differences and acknowledging our differences, and but respecting that there are things that we can do to work together despite our differences, whether it's other religions, whether it's other countries. How do we work together to make a better world? And ultimately, that fosters evangelization. It's not a matter of conquest or coercion, but it's being able to respect each other's free will and work together on our shared values and really live out the gospel in a way that is more profound than, the actions more than words, to use a fake quote from St. Francis of Assisi.
And on that theme, Mike, I was rereading this is the Pope Francis's address in 2015, October 2015, at the 50th anniversary of the institution of the Synod of Bishops. This is the one where he really first laid out this whole idea of synodality, and he says right at the end of it, he says, the commitment to build a synodal church, a mission to which we're all called, each with the role entrusted to him by the Lord, has significant ecumenical implications. And he talks about a delegation that he had received from the Patriarchate of Constantinople. So the idea of this to me is really profound, that synodality could have real implications for pursuing unity with other Christians, and in particular the synodal aspects of orthodoxy, which are very important there. I mean, Pope Francis even talks about, he brings up a quote from Pope John Paul II, who had said that in the service of ecumenical unity, he would be willing to reevaluate like the role of the Pope, or the sort of the level of sort of authority of the Pope, and kind of cast it in a new light, if this would potentially further some kind of union between Christians. So to me, that's incredibly profound, that this idea of synodality could lead to a new understanding of the Catholic Church, but also a new understanding of how we relate to Orthodox Christians, Protestants. It's really an incredible opening up with huge implications. But of course, at the same time, it's threatening, because it threatens our really distinctive Catholic identity, right? And so that's kind of, threatening to a lot of people.
And it's also threatening because you're describing mercy, like beyond the structural pieces of it, it's this notion of a rediscovered sense of shared belonging. It's integration, and ultimately it's when can we make the jump? When can we say, all right, come here? It's close enough that we could. Yeah,
it's probably an incredibly long process, right? But it's a process that starts with listening and
and Francis said it's not going to happen with the theologians.
Yeah,
like it's not going to happen in a meeting where they broker out a deal about, okay, well, let's hammer out these rules and these limits and these doctrines.
No.
It's going to have to take the Holy Spirit to bring us together, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, really, that's what it is. And yeah, I'm tailing off. Do you want to show another Tobin quote? Another Tobin clip? Which one do you want? I numbered them the way you did, Don.
Oh, geez.
I was thinking one that would follow what you were just talking about, Mike, would be the long-term institutional conversion. That would be the third one, but I'm not sure if that was the longer clip.
That is the longer clip, but we have 9 minutes, and this is 2 minutes long, so we'll have 7 minutes to talk about it.
Since I mentioned John the 23rd, let's draw on him as the starting point to paint a picture of the long-term institutional conversion we are currently caught up in. John the 23rd read the signs of turmoil and destruction that had followed humankind out of the first half of the 20th century, saw that the church had to be intentional and missionary as it possibly could with its witness. And the way to achieve all this was through a council. In effect, he called on the council to create a blueprint for the engine that would power the bark of Peter in the third millennium. John cast a vision. This is what we need to build. Vatican II produced a blueprint. Paul VI set to work constructing it. John Paul II made sure it kept to the exact specifications required. Benedict XVI put on the finishing touches on this propulsion engine, and now Francis has flipped the switch to on. As Superior General of the Redemptorists, I was privileged to participate in 5 synods, 3 under John Paul II and 2 under Benedict XVI. It was as if they were tuning up an engine. You can see how the method changed over those 5 synods. You have to tune it up because you can't leave the functions of such a crucial machine to chance. And so it's interesting now that Francis has started revving up the engine to see what it can do, that folks who seem most threatened from the beginning have been the ones with the most engineered grasp of all the norms and canons. If A equals irregular union and B equals not living as brother and sister, then A plus B equals never can be admitted to the Eucharist. To this, I would posit that if you can be the most knowledgeable mechanic on earth and still be a rotten driver.
He liked his driving metaphors throughout.
Oh, he's from Detroit.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were a lot of Blues Brothers references and Ferris Bueller in there too. So if you, it's worth watching the whole.
But the engine metaphor does work, and it does fit with what we've been talking about the post-conciliar, we're turning on the engine and moving using this as how we are moving into the future. One of the things that jumps out to me though about, he said he participated in 5 synods and it was kind of like a learning process, but we've also even seen under Francis's pontificate changes in how the synods are being conducted. And I personally am excited about women participating in the synods, and in the future synod on synodality, we're going to have Sister Natalie.
With a vote.
Yeah, with a vote. at the next synod. So we're seeing a shift even still. So I'm not sure if either of you, David or Don, would like to comment on changes to even the synodal process as it's moving forward, and what, is this principle of mercy motivating that? Is it an inclusivity? Like what's motivating it, and what might we expect to see in the future? Wow, lots of questions.
Go ahead.
We've got 2 millennia of tradition, but then like a really kind of, what's the word? A heavy improvisational sense, like the freedom of, oh well, that was kind of rough. Okay, again, even the fact that they're doing a synod on synodality, and Cardinal Tobin touches on that too, and so it's a neat tension between like having this vast tradition to draw from, but it's just been 50 some years. Like it's not. They really can keep adjusting, and we'll find our feet. It's but we keep waiting for those new wine skins that we ordered from Amazon, but they they haven't come yet. So we keep pouring our new wine into the old ones.
Someone for Where Peter Is needs to, because I don't understand how wine skins work and what someone's got to lay that all out for me, because I understand that it's a metaphor that people use all the time, but
you haven't heard
Jesus
that homily,
used, Mike. It was Jesus.
There's Jesus all along.
I believe Jesus explains the metaphor.
I don't know. I it's been a while, but I just no. But I mean, why would it be it comes in a bottle at the store, at a restaurant? It's in a glass. I don't have any skins.
It's old habits die hard is probably the really bland.
Old dogs and new tricks.
That one too. Yes,
I know that one. That's a good one.
That you probably really.
I could rewrite the gospel according to Mike, with my own life experiences worked in there, my own expressions.
Express this to Mike in terms that he understands.
Ferris Bueller and Blues Brothers instead of whatever it is they talk about in the Bible. I'm Catholic, it's the Jim Gaffigan line. Sorry. Are you watching, Jeannie? No, I don't think she is.
I appreciated, though, that Cardinal Tobin was kind of pointing out the canonists among us who might have the more rigorous approach to, judging the new movements of the church based on the rules that we are most comfortable with. And I know we have 2 minutes till we reach our hour time frame here, but that is a phenomenon that seems to repeat itself in every new event, is we have applying the old to current situations, which is a dynamic process, but it leads to a lot of tensions. So I'm not sure.
We'll see what happens in Germany. There's a lot of tensions that are building up there. I think it could be potentially productive tensions in the end. I really hope it is, but we'll see what happens. But this is the other side of synodality, I think, is that sometimes it can be done too quickly. It can be done in with the wrong sort of spirit, maybe. And I'm not condemning the synodal way. I think there's positive elements of it, but I think they maybe need to rework how they're approaching this idea of synodality to bring it in line with Pope Francis's fuller vision.
Got to make sure it's walking with, as opposed to walking away from or trying to redirect or where it belongs or whatever.
Yeah,
taking the wineskin and putting it where, But anyway,
Pope Francis's letter to the church in Germany—that's what it was all about. It was we need to walk together. So.
Mm-hmm.
So before we wrap up, I just have two quick things before we give Don the final word. So last week, Christopher Lamb and I did a Twitter Spaces global event. If you have a mobile device and you have a Twitter app on it, you might notice that at the top of the screen there are like these blue circles mostly, but then sometimes there are like purple circles, and those are called Twitter Spaces. And it's sort of like it's like a conference call that you're listening to, but so much better than that. It's a Twitter space. Anyway, Christopher Lamb and I are doing it again tomorrow at noon Eastern time. So if you're on your Twitter machine and you see a purple dot, go ahead and join. And this time we will be joined by none other than America Media's Colleen Dully, who is the Inside the Vatican podcast host, along with Jerry O'Connell, who is America's. So sort of a rivalry. Like, I don't know, maybe she'll start hosting it with Christopher Lamb from now on instead of Jerry. Who knows? And then and the other thing, so Critical Catholic, David Lafferty and I had our third go around, but our first live episode on Sunday. Were you able to watch it, Don? Did you tune in to Critical Catholic?
I wasn't.
You weren't. Okay.
There's a podcast version of it too. You can.
There's a podcast
Excellent.
version. It's got a cool theme song, and
It does. We don't even have as cool as its theme song.
we almost had a theme song this time, but it's a long story. And yeah. So Don, where can people find you? What do you do? What's in the future? What are you thinking about? What do you want to tell us? What's your wisdom?
Oh, geez. I tweet at Clemmer_Don. That's a long story. And you can occasionally catch me in Catholic News Service, NCR, US Catholic, mostly a print guy, but I'll just say this has been an unmitigated delight, and I'm so grateful for the invitation and for the conversations that you all are fostering. I think it's a really positive thing. So thank you, Mike. Thank you, David, and thank you, Rachel. It's just a delight.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah. Great to meet you in person, sort of.
Yeah, seeing how we meet people now. Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's all for tonight. I don't know if Mike, you might be freezing up again on us, but so if you are listening or watching live, please share this video with everyone on your feed. If you like what we do, please subscribe to our podcast and consider becoming a patron for us on Patreon. You can get that link on our website, wherepeteris.com. We should be back next week, but keep Mike in your prayers because he has his other eye doctor appointment next week and he may likely not be with us. But hopefully Melinda will be back with us and we will have an exciting new panel of guests next Thursday evening. But have a good weekend, everyone, and thanks for joining us.
Bye.
Bye.